If you thought political division in America couldn't get worse, wait until you hear what happened in the last 24 hours. Before we dive into this story that's shaking the nation right now, hit that subscribe button and smash the like button because you need to stay informed about what's really happening. Protests erupted across multiple American cities yesterday as federal agents intensified crackdowns on demonstrations, escalating tensions that political analysts are calling the most severe domestic standoff since the civil rights era. According to the New York Times reporting from January 17, 2026, at least 12 major cities witnessed simultaneous confrontations between protesters and federal law enforcement. The catalyst? A series of executive orders issued this week that activists claim violate constitutional protections. But here's where it gets complicated. Federal authorities argue they're enforcing existing laws and maintaining public order. Protesters counter that these actions represent authoritarian overreach. The reality, as documented by multiple independent observers on the ground, falls somewhere in a deeply troubling gray area. In Portland, Oregon, federal agents deployed tear gas and rubber bullets against crowds that the Associated Press estimates numbered over 15,000 people. Eyewitness accounts describe scenes of chaos as demonstrators, many wearing protective gear, clashed with heavily armored officers outside federal buildings. But Portland wasn't alone. Chicago saw similar confrontations near the federal courthouse. In Austin, Texas, protesters blocked major highways for 6 hours before tactical teams moved in. Philadelphia, Seattle, Denver, all reporting similar patterns. The coordination suggests something bigger is happening here. Reuters confirmed that at least 340 people were arrested across these cities within a 12-hour period. Most face federal charges, not state charges, which legal experts say could carry significantly harsher penalties. Here's what should concern everyone, regardless of political affiliation. Constitutional law professors interviewed by the New York Times point out that the federal government's authority to deploy agents into cities without state or local approval exists in limited circumstances. But the scope of current operations, they argue, may be testing those limits in unprecedented ways. Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt, authors of How Democracies Die, warned in their research that erosion of democratic norms often happens gradually, through actions that individually might seem justifiable but collectively represent dangerous shifts in power dynamics. If you're finding this information valuable, tap that like button now and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. The protesters themselves represent a coalition that defies simple political categorization. According to on-the-ground reporting, the crowds include civil rights activists, libertarians concerned about federal overreach, veterans, teachers, healthcare workers, and ordinary citizens who say they've never protested before but felt compelled to act. One retired Marine, interviewed anonymously due to fear of retaliation, told reporters he served his country for 22 years and never imagined he'd see American federal agents treating American citizens this way in American cities. But federal officials present a sharply different narrative. Department of Homeland Security statements emphasize that violent elements have infiltrated otherwise peaceful protests. They cite incidents of property damage, assaults on officers, and what they describe as organized attempts to overwhelm federal security. Video evidence shows some protesters throwing objects and attempting to breach barriers. The question becomes, who escalated first? And does it even matter at this point? Political scientists studying crowd dynamics note that once confrontations reach a certain threshold, the original catalyst becomes almost irrelevant. Each side sees itself as responding to the other's aggression, creating a feedback loop that's extraordinarily difficult to break. We're now seeing exactly that pattern multiply across the country. Social media has amplified everything. Videos of confrontations spread within minutes, often without context, inflaming emotions on all sides. Some clips show protesters acting peacefully before agents advanced. Others show property destruction and violence toward officers. Both sets of images are real, both are being weaponized. Major tech platforms struggled yesterday to moderate content, with accusations flying that they're either censoring legitimate documentation of government overreach or allowing incitement to violence, depending on who's making the accusation. The economic impact is already measurable. Downtown business districts in affected cities shut down yesterday. The Chamber of Commerce estimates losses in the tens of millions from just one day of disruption. Some business owners express sympathy with protesters, others demand order be restored, many feel caught in the middle. Here's where the situation becomes even more precarious. State governors are now facing impossible choices. Do they request federal assistance, potentially inviting more federal presence into their states? Do they deploy state police and National Guard to separate federal agents from protesters? Do they try to negotiate while violence unfolds in their streets? 3 governors held an emergency conference call yesterday, according to sources who spoke to the New York Times on condition of anonymity. They're exploring legal options to limit federal operations in their states, but constitutional experts say their authority to do so is murky at best. This is the moment where you need to drop a comment below. What do you think happens next? Are we heading toward resolution or escalation? Your perspective matters, so share it now. Civil rights organizations have filed emergency lawsuits in federal court challenging the legal basis for the crackdowns. The ACLU announced they're seeking immediate injunctions. Constitutional scholars note that these cases could ultimately reach the Supreme Court, potentially establishing precedents that will shape federal-state power dynamics for generations. But legal processes take time, and the situation on the streets is evolving by the hour. International reaction has been swift and concerning for America's global standing. Allied nations expressed worry through carefully worded diplomatic statements. Adversaries seize the opportunity to highlight what they frame as American hypocrisy on human rights and democracy. The United Nations Human Rights Office issued a statement calling for restraint and respect for peaceful assembly rights, a message typically directed at other countries, not the United States. Local officials in affected cities report their emergency services are stretched thin. Hospitals treated hundreds for injuries ranging from tear gas exposure to blunt force trauma. Police departments designed for local law enforcement find themselves mediating between federal agents and their own communities. One police chief, speaking off the record, described the situation as impossible. Officers are caught between federal directives, local political pressure, and their own judgments about what's right. Morale, he said, has never been lower. Religious leaders across denominations called for calm yesterday, with several organizing interfaith vigils for peace. But even these efforts face division, with some congregations split over whether the protests represent righteous resistance or dangerous disorder. The media landscape reflects the same fractures. Different outlets covering identical events reach opposite conclusions about who bears responsibility. Americans watching coverage increasingly inhabit separate information universes with incompatible narratives about what's actually happening. This fragmentation of shared reality, researchers warn, may be the most dangerous element of all. Because when citizens can't even agree on basic facts about events, how do democratic processes function? How do communities heal? How does anyone find common ground? Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss updates on this developing situation. Historical parallels are both instructive and unsettling. The 1960s saw similar confrontations between federal authority and protesters, though the political alignments were different. The 1992 Los Angeles riots demonstrated how quickly urban unrest can spread. The 2020 protests showed how modern communication amplifies and accelerates everything. But this moment has unique characteristics. The federal-state tensions are more pronounced. The information environment is more fragmented. The political polarization is more extreme. And critically, there's less shared trust in institutions that might mediate conflicts. Economic anxiety compounds everything. Many Americans are already struggling with inflation, job insecurity, and uncertainty about the future. When people feel economically precarious, social stability becomes more fragile. Small sparks can ignite larger fires. Some analysts worry we're approaching what they call a cascade point, where multiple crises intersect and reinforce each other in ways that exceed any institution's capacity to manage. Others argue that American democracy has weathered worse storms and will again. They point to the nation's resilience, its institutions, its traditions of eventually finding ways through division. Who's right may depend on decisions made in the next few days and weeks. Federal officials face a choice about whether to continue current tactics or seek de-escalation. State and local leaders must decide how to respond. Protest organizers must determine their strategies. Media must choose how to frame events. And millions of individual Americans must decide how to process what's happening and what, if anything, they should do. The stakes are enormous. We're not just talking about policy disagreements. We're talking about fundamental questions of how power operates in America, who has it, how it's constrained, and what happens when different levels of government clash. These aren't abstract constitutional questions anymore. They're playing out in real time with real consequences for real people in real American cities. Drop a comment right now with your thoughts. Are you concerned? Hopeful? Angry? Confused? The conversation needs your voice. What happens next week could set trajectories for years to come. Will cooler heads prevail? Will tensions escalate further? Will there be attempts at dialogue and de-escalation, or are we locked into a confrontational path? The reporting from the New York Times, Associated Press, and Reuters provides crucial documentation of events as they unfold. But documentation alone doesn't resolve underlying conflicts. It just ensures we have a record of how we got wherever we're going. Citizens across the political spectrum express exhaustion with constant crisis and division. Many say they just want normalcy, stability, and the ability to focus on their lives without fear of social breakdown. But when asked what they're willing to compromise or how to achieve that stability, consensus evaporates. This is the challenge facing America right now. Not just managing immediate confrontations in the streets, but finding a path back to some form of functional governance and social cohesion. Whether that's possible and what it would require remains one of the most important open questions of our time. If you found this breakdown valuable, smash that like button one more time, make sure you're subscribed, and share this video with someone who needs to understand what's really happening right now. Knowledge is power, and staying informed is the first step toward being part of solutions rather than problems. As the story continues to develop, more cities may see protests today. Federal response strategies may shift, legal challenges will proceed, and millions of Americans will wake up wondering what kind of country they're living in and what role they should play in shaping its future. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay tuned.